Okay, guys, good morning. Thanks so much for joining today. So, with me is Larissa, CEO and co-founder of Pod Foods, and Bella, CEO and co-founder of Better Sour. So, we're so excited to talk about all things CPG, but namely, I think the conversation is going to be unpacked around getting products on the shelf and then getting products off the shelf. So maybe we can start off with some intros because I know you ladies have such a great background in CPG, investor relations, and all the wonderful things about removing barriers for emerging brands to win. So I would love for you to intro yourself.
Sure, I'll go. My name is Larissa. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Pod Foods. My co-founder is Fiona. She's not here with me, but she's very important to mention as well. And of course, the rest of my team too, but I can't name everybody. So Pod Foods is a B2B marketplace in the grocery supply chain. It's a new business model in the space of distribution where we help emerging brands reach grocery store shelves. And I'm sure we'll talk lots more about that. But my origin story and the reason why I started this company was Fiona and I had a cookie business way back in 2014. And we were making cookies out of roasted green peas.
What?
And we were crushing them up and, rolling them into little balls, putting them in the oven and then into little packages. And we were trying to get them into grocery stores, but it was extremely difficult to work with the incumbent solutions that existed at that time and still exist today. And we were living in San Francisco. There was an app for everything, innovation hub of the world, at least then, and still today. And we decided that it was time to create a better model for distribution. And we stopped making the cookie company and we started Pod Foods.
Incredible.
I'm Bella Hughes, and I am the co-founder and head of new business development at Better Sour. I launched the brand with my lifelong best friend, Samira Niku. We've been friends for 37 years since we were a year old, which is pretty outstanding. She also is our CEO. And so nice to be on this call because I am a repeat CPG founder and I've had an outstanding experience getting to work with both Social Nature and Pod Foods. So love sharing space with other women leaders in CPG. A little bit about Better Sour. We are a globally inspired sour gummy candy company. And our gummy candies, what's unique about them is that they're actually sour from within. Most sour gummies, they're a sweet center relying on citric acid on the outside. And, the origin story for Samira and I is we are the daughters of Iranian immigrants. And of all places, they immigrated and settled in Honolulu, Hawaii, which is where we met when we were a year old at a Nowruz party, which is Persian New Year. And really, really central to Iranian cuisine, Middle Eastern food and snacks. And then in Hawaii, most of our food influence is from the Asia Pacific, our sour tart, fresh, dried, and fruits. We didn't like the candy on the market. We wanted to see these global flavor trend that for us is really just a reflection of our heritage, our culture, reflected in our favorite flavor of all time, sour. So we launched the brand in 2023. Our very first distributor was Pod Foods. So very nice to share space again. Thanks for having us, Ashley.
Of course. Just a little bit more about, I guess, my origin story is that my name's Ashley. I'm one of the founding members of Social Nature. I just had my 10-year anniversary with the company. We started Social Nature with the idea that for every bad for you product, there's a better for you option out there. And so what we really wanted to do is inspire our community to try natural. We have over 1 million shoppers that come to the platform to discover better for you products like Better Sour. And yeah, one of the things that we're really inspired to do is to help remove barriers for emerging brands to win. And so that's what really inspired this. This is our first fireside chat around kind of some of this domain expertise that we've established over the years. And of course, we have met many fabulous partners such as yourselves. And so that's why I wanted to invite you to the table as our first chat around this. Larissa, when you and I first met, I was really inspired by just the Pod Food story And probably one of the most common topics of conversations amongst startups when they show up at Social Nature's door, which we're very thankful that that is often the case, that brands come to us trying to understand all things CPG, is there's always a lot of confusion around the difference between like a distributor and a broker. And so maybe we can just start there. I think it's always nice to kind of have like a foundational understanding of like, what is a typical distributor, and of course, how is Pod Foods disrupting the space? Because I know a lot of brands do bitch to me about the more traditional distributor model. So we'd love to hear about how Pod Foods is different.
Yeah, absolutely. So the distribution landscape in natural food, specifically in grocery, really consists of two major players at the national scale. So that would be UNFI and KeHE. UNFI is larger than KeHE, it's publicly traded, but ultimately they are operating as a bit of a duopoly. You know, they're two sides of the same coin, and they're competing for primary distributor relationships with key accounts, so big retailers. UNFI has a strong relationship with Whole Foods, which just got renewed. KeHE has a strong relationship with Sprouts. But in addition to these two giants, there are also regional distributors. They have a similar business model to the two giants as well, in the sense that they buy and sell product. But specifically with UNFI and KeHE, who are dominating the space, if you want to become a national brand, they buy product in bulk from manufacturers at a marked down rate. That would be the distributor pricing. They hold that product in inventory in their distribution centers, depending on where you're launching. And then they mark it up to, they mark the price of the product up to various retailers, and then they resell it. And so ultimately, you know, that sounds great. You get big orders, you sell your product, you get placement in various retailers across the country, and that's great. You know, the brand wants to say, great, I sold my product, it's done. As we'll hear from Bella, it's not done. You need to support the product once it's on the shelf as well. But the reason why we started this company was because within that whole process, there's a little bit of a misalignment of incentives that creates a lot of challenges for brands, especially emerging brands in the space. So if the big distributor is buying product at that marked down rate, that's fine. But as the brand, you don't really know what they're going to be selling your product for in all cases. And with their biggest accounts, they often lose money reselling that product because the biggest retailers are demanding such markdowns. You know, they don't want big cost plus contracts. And so ultimately, the distributor has such thin margins with their biggest customers that they have to recoup that money on the brand side of the equation with lots of hidden fees and chargebacks and deductions for things that you didn't know that you would be paying for necessarily if you're starting a company because you wanted to create like the best sauce from your grandmother that was, you know, your favorite dinner growing up. These aren't the challenges that you expect to run into when you're starting an emerging brand company. And so we certainly weren't, you know, as the cookie company. And when we started to look into the space, that's why we realized that there was opportunity here to create a new business model. The regional distributors can be good as well. You know, if you're starting out as a brand in one specific region and your feet on the ground, you know, trying to support the accounts, that's great. They can help you get placement into stores. They're more analog, as we say, you know, they buy and sell product similar to those large distributors. But because they are smaller, they tend to be more favorable to work with as early stage brands. But ultimately, you want to be national. You know, you don't want to scale your business, especially if you're raising money. Maybe you don't, and that's also something that you need to consider for sure. But if you want to be a national brand, Pod Foods was created to help you do that, to get from that inception point all the way to escape velocity or exit. We're a growing company. We're knocking over more and more and more retailers every day, every month, every year. We just launched with Safeway in Northern California. We work with Sprouts nationally, and we really sit next to the big incumbent players that exist. So, you know, Sprouts works closely with KeHE, and we're a secondary provider that comes in, and we're able to support them with emerging brands, as an example. And we bring in these innovative items, and we can get it to the shelf faster. The reason why we're able to do that is because it's a new business model. So with traditional distribution, as I described, they buy and they sell product. And so it creates all of this fallout in some cases. And for us, what we do is we connect brands and retailers directly on an emerging brands marketplace platform. So the brands can set their own wholesale pricing, which is the price that the retailer is going to pay. And then we take a standard cut of sales. So instead of buying and selling and creating all these different markup structures, depending on the retailer, the brand can plan because they know how much money they're going to be paying Pod Foods with every sale. Free to sign up, but as orders come through, we take a cut off of that wholesale price and we pay the rest to the brands. As part of the marketplace service, we also handle full service logistics, which is crucial. I mean, the reason why distributors exist is because they're able to deliver consolidated orders to the retailer. The retailer can't work with hundreds of thousands of different brands to fill up their store. Doesn't make any sense for shipping costs or operationally. And so we're able to deliver that same consolidated experience without all of the problems that are associated with the traditional model. Brokers are a different story. Brokers also take a cut off of that wholesale price, typically ranges from 5 to 15%. And it depends on the broker that you're working with. Sometimes if it's a regional broker, they'll give you a list of stores that they're going to take a cut of sales, regardless of whether they get you placement in that store. Sometimes it's only if they get you placement in that store. And you can essentially think of them as an outsourced sales team or somebody who can work closely with your sales team that has relationships with these key accounts. Pod Foods also has relationships with these key accounts, and we're able to provide a lot of the role of a broker, but we don't promise to be your outsourced sales team.
Very cool. Bella, I mean, one of the most astonishing things that you have achieved with Better Sour and that honestly was very notable, was going from 100 stores to 1,500 retail accounts in just 12 months. And in this CPG climate, which arguably is rather challenging, that's amazing. So I think one of the things that a lot of the registrants was interested in is, how did you achieve that? You know, when did you decide to work with Pod Foods? And what made you decide to work with Pod Foods is probably helpful for context too.
Yeah, amazing. And such a good question. I think it's really important to know my background, because I do feel the Better Sour story has been a bit of an anomaly. I am a repeat founder. So I had a failed ice cream company. I had a successful iced tea company, Shaka Tea, that I scaled and exited to King's Hawaiian Irresistible Foods Group. And this is my third time doing this. I did not know what I know now the first or the second time. So just wanting to share that, because it took me 2 startups to like learn and have all this knowledge walking into the space. So I think that's really important to acknowledge. And then the other thing I'll say is, like, we are well capitalized. We have raised capital and a really nice amount. We're not too public about what we've raised. A lot of my former investors came into this business. So this is a really, really expensive game to play at, CPG. Unfortunately, the margins are razor thin for everyone involved. And I do think having experience really goes a long way. For anyone who's a first-time founder, one of the best things to do is create an advisory board right away. And I'm a repeat founder. And even before we launched the brand into retail, Samira and I created an advisory board because there's just so much knowledge. No matter how many times you've done this, no way one person can know everything. So just wanted to kind of say that background. And, you know, being a repeat founder, one of the things that was really important bringing to the table was knowing that, you know, initially most of us who get into CPG mission-driven businesses, which has always been my story with any brand that I've co-founded, there really is a why. A why is why you launch these brands. There is a reason for being, but, you know, being more seasoned now, I know that I need to launch my why within the first 3 months, some data, because the only thing that will open retail doors and enable you to raise investment capital to scale and grow, if you're a scaling kind of model, which is what I'm interested to create, is that data story. I remember being told this when I was a first and second time founder, and sort of being, I'd say, like a little like cocky, like, no, it's all about the why. It's only about the mission. And I heard from these really seasoned CPG veterans, like, it's a data story. What you really need is a data story. And I wanted to just talk about my story, about like why my product was superior, what was the mission, what we were trying to tackle. But walking into this and really being like, yeah, it is a data story, because the only way you can live your mission, to live your why, is by opening doors, having adequate capital to initially support that growth. Most CPG brands, it takes about 5 years to get, cash flow positive. So really, really, really key for us was growing and scaling and having data stories early on in the natural channel and the MULO channel. And Pod Foods was our very first distributor, and so much gratitude, because it's tough finding a distributor. I am Switzerland. I work with all distributors. I also do about a third of my business today direct. So, I love everyone. Everyone who's part of this industry makes the world go round, enables Samira and I to share our sour gummies, our Middle Eastern women-owned founded business. But was really, really outstanding about Pod is that they took us on with no data. Like, we weren't, usually how it works with a distributor is you might launch and personally go sell into the first 20 doors yourself, the little neighborhood mom and pops. I did that with my last business with Shaka Tea. I think for that brand, my husband was my co-founder for that. Maybe for the first 50 to 70 doors, we'd personally go in and pitch on the island of Oahu, where I was born and raised. And then we'd actually deliver for the small stores to initially even just get some data and accounts that you could go hand off and get a distributor. So what was outstanding about Pod again is that we were there with our sample bags that were not even the actual manufactured bag. And one of our advisors at the time was also at Pod Foods. So just want to acknowledge that, the amazing Mike Shaw. And we were able to work with them to get into our very first retail door, Erewhon, and they took us on. And that is really a rarity from my experience with distribution. Usually you need to have a number of accounts to hand off or at least some market data. So we've been working with Pod Foods. We've been in retail now for 15 months. We started selling May 9th, 2023. And, they've been really, really instrumental in also helping us pitch innovation sets. And I'd say that is pretty unique. Sometimes I've referred to them almost as a hybrid between a broker and a distributor, because I have rarely had, and I've worked with so many different amazing distributors across the country, from beverage. I used to be in ice cream, now I'm in candy, but it is pretty rare to have a distributor actually go take you in and actively pitch you. So we did the Sprouts innovation set with them. We did Fresh Time. We just were made this summer, due to our successful test in Fresh Time, a permanent item in all their stores.
Love that. Yeah, data is everything. I wish, I wish it was the warm and fuzzies that got you on the shelf and kept you on the shelf, but the data is really what keeps that staying power. Larissa, what kind of data can emerging brands expect from working with Pod Foods?
So our aim, if you're used to selling on Shopify as an e-commerce brand, our aim is to kind of match that within wholesale. So you can log into your own dashboard. You can see all of your sales analytics in terms of orders that are coming through from specific buyers and specific stores, to your inventory in different distribution centers. We have different distribution centers all over the country. And so you can track that movement and track your inventory levels depending on where you are. As well as recently we launched Pod Insights. And so you can start to measure your ROI on promotions. So we're able to support promotions if you want to run everyday low price, or, whatever the promotion might be in a specific key account. We're able to help you track that and build that data story that Bella mentioned.
Amazing. One of the unique positions that I've had working at Social Nature for 10 years now is just hearing from thousands of brands each year. So I'm still taking on, some discovery calls depending on the nature of the brand. And one of the interesting kind of things that I've noticed is we categorize brands into 4 different buckets. So, and their why is to kind of where they're at and what they're looking to achieve with shopper marketing is very different as they go upstream. So, as we are chatting, very early stage startups, they're trying to get on the shelf. That's not usually where we can help, but certainly this is where we're able to make connections to companies like Pod Foods to help get products and brands on the shelf. And next, we would call the brand an emerging brand. So after startup, they kind of graduate to an emerging brand. where they're getting some traction at retail, especially kind of like in the innovation set like Forager, Fresh Time. And so that's when brands start working with Social Nature to kind of get that use that Forager kind of project as a stepping stone to get permanent position on shelf. Then, as we go upstream, I would call the next stage of brand high growth. And that's at that point, brands are usually in 2,000 plus stores. Then they're trying to kind of branch out from specialty or natural into conventional, and starting to get kind of tests with Target and Walmart. And then our kind of the big guns, so to speak, are more established, and they use Social Nature to launch new products at retail and for review syndication to retailer sites. So I'm sure it's interesting because to me, there is themes and similarities across all four buckets, but their why and kind of what they're looking to achieve changes as you go upstream. So, I mean, Bella, you've had such a unique position to go from, you know, startup to what I would almost consider high growth in 15 months, which is incredible. Any advice for brands?
3,000 doors by the end of this year.
That's
so
wild.
I
literally have never seen it before.
Well, no, I've seen it because I remember, I think it's unfortunate, it's human nature, but a lot of being a founder is sometimes comparing yourself to other founders and other brands. And I remember when I was on my first and second startup and I wasn't this seasoned, I'd look and be like, how is that brand doing so much? We start at the same time. But I will say, the more you peel down the layers, a lot of the brands that are very high growth, they do have repeat founders, and or like they're extremely well funded, and or they've got a lot of super seasoned folks in executive leadership. So I just wish I could go back to my younger self and tell myself that, in case there are any first-time founders listening.
So that's it. So that's a great question, and maybe just to dig into that a little bit more. So, I mean, it is, you know, it's certainly having the cash, having the seasoned team around you to unblock some of those common issues. Maybe we can unpack that for the audience a little bit more, because I know there's a lot of questions from registrants around, like, what does that actually look like? You know, who would be some of your first hires? What are some of the challenges and problems that you're looking to solve with those first hires?
Yeah, and I will say, so for Samira and I, we are so grateful for all the doors opening, the positive media coverage, but being really, really honest and vulnerable, there was a lot of skepticism around our product from buyers. And I would say, like, that's something that we knew immediately we needed to push through with a great data story. I feel like data story is just going to be like the name of anything I talk about. Although we're responding to like this big thing, global flavors, you've seen the rise everywhere, and gummy candy is driving, you know, the majority of the growth in confectionery. Non-chocolate gums and mints, which is the category we fall under, drove over 60% of the growth according to Spins in the candy set. Single serve is driving like over 30%. So there's already, like, as a macro looking at like the category, tons of great data points. But the other thing is like gummy candy, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And if it's not broke, why fix it? And, you know, we came out there and our candy is quite different on flavor. We've got flavors out there like calamansi lime, a very popular citrus found in the Philippines, all over Hawaii, that we grew up with, ume plum from Japan, you know, apricot, which is a nod to Middle East. And, you know, there was just hesitation from buyers, because you have to get in a buyer's perspective, right? Every tiny square inch is valuable real estate. They're definitely under pressures about hitting their own sales goals. So if they're going to give you like this much, our bag's about this big, I should have some on this right now, but you can visit us at bettersour.com to see what we look like later. You really have to be in the service mindset. Like, how am I bringing value and service to you that I will sell a lot, bring a value to your customers, and you really want to be driving incremental growth and especially bringing new customers to the category. So that sounds like a long rant about answering, I feel, Ashley, your question, but I hope it just kind of contextualizes the perspective that we had going in, and just having buyers not be sure about our product, even though we were showing early great data in our initial accounts. It just really honed in that we needed to focus on continuing to prove out that data story in MULO and natural. A lot of times what might work in natural may not necessarily translate to a mass retailer like the Targets and the Krogers and the Albertsons of the world. And then at the same time, ensuring that we were understanding that we were communicating our product properly to get, like, you've got 1 second, maybe 2, and your best marketing at the end of the day is first and foremost your packaging and getting feedback, which we got a lot, Ashley, when we get to the social nature component from customers just shopping in a retailer.
Amazing. That's really helpful. Larissa, when so I don't know, how do you, when you're working with new brands, how do you decide which retailers to, is there a rhyme or reason? Do you have kind of like, depending on category and buyer, this is who you present to first, and then there's a stepping stone? How are you thinking of that?
Yes, it depends on the brand's stage of growth, often first and foremost. If they're just starting out, we usually encourage them to sign up to our Pod Direct platform, which means they don't have to send any inventory anywhere yet, but they're on our marketplace. They can leverage us as a distributor when they're going out to make sales. And then as they start to pick up traction, then we would bring them into a specific distribution center. Then usually the path is you go into independent retail. And so we'll start with accounts like Erewhon, or in specific regions that have specific audiences. Typically they're more niche, they're more progressive in terms of their innovation set, even versus the Whole Foods and Sprouts of the world that are natural retailers, but they're bigger. And so typically their idea of innovation looks different than the idea of innovation in an Erewhon. And so we would usually advise the brand, to go in their own local market or wherever they have the most support on the ground so that they can actually help those sales once it's on the shelf. And then as they start to get traction there, we've got key accounts all across the country, and we know what these key accounts are looking for because we're having, monthly meetings with them, but also we're seeing their ordering behavior. And so we can understand from our own data that specific things are trending and that specific brands are going to do well in specific types of accounts. And so we do pitch products actively in our monthly box of innovation. And so we include brands depending on the retailer in this box that's customized retailer by retailer, and they can see all the latest and greatest of the things that they should be looking at. So that's one way that brands can get placement, but we're careful to stress, we don't replace your own sales team. And once you establish that relationship with the retailer, then we can help facilitate the whole placement of the product on the shelf and what that launch actually looks like in terms of promotions and things like that, which can get really fun. We just rolled out Travis Barker's brand and Sprouts, Barker Wellness, and it was a long project in terms of making sure that everybody was on the same page about that launch and how could we make the biggest splash with it. So that's an example, but a lot of it has to do with the brand and what their intentions are, and we're really just here to support that. I mean, Better Sour is a great example of a super high growth brand that's going to be awesome, regardless of Pod Foods. And they came to us at a very, very early stage. And so we wanted to help with that. They've also, Annabella mentioned it, they're Switzerland. They work with other distributors and we support that. It's like, great, you can enter other accounts with other distributors that we don't yet work with. And as we scale, we can help brands enter more and more of the key accounts through Pod Foods. But we wouldn't just go and pitch a product to Safeway if we knew that they couldn't support that volume yet. We wouldn't it wouldn't be a good experience for anybody involved. It's usually like creating that path to market that makes the most sense for a specific brand and audience.
Amazing. Marie's popping in with a question here. And so do you work with Canadian suppliers as well? And I'm wondering if her question is, do you work with Canadian retailers?
We do work with Canadian suppliers. You would have to handle your own import basically into the United States, and then we can take it over from there for handling the inventory. And then we have worked with some Canadian retailers in the past. Summerhill Market was one of them. I think we might still work with them. I'll need to double check on that. It hasn't been a major focus for us yet, but it's definitely on the horizon.
Great. Keep popping those questions in. That's super helpful, guys. One of the things that we've kind of alluded to is, so if Pod Foods helps brands get products on the shelf, I would say that our relationship would be getting products off the shelf. So If you don't already know Social Nature, while we have a community of Better For You shoppers, we're a B Corp certified company and only work in the Better For You space. We have a digital sampling platform which allows brands to drive trial at specific key retailers by your exact store address. That's one of the major differentiators with Social Nature, is that we can work with very early stage brands who might be only in some of Sprouts locations, for instance. And so you give us that store address, and then we geo-target and send new customers into those stores to try the product. We were very excited to work with Better Sour. I'd love to kind of hear from you, Bella, like what was your kind of take on how the Social Nature program worked for Better Sour, and kind of what was your why in initially working with us?
Yeah, great question. And we came to Social Nature because we were placed in a 500 store Target test that rolled out at the end of January. And there were like, it was various resets for like a period of 2 or 3 months of this year. And obviously, when you're a new brand and you're in something that's somewhat like a test, you really want to perform well so you can earn that permanent placement. Target, you know, is just such a great MULO kind of retailer for that data that we were looking to get. And we came to Social Nature because as a new brand, it's so competitive. And we wanted to ensure that there was more trust, particularly on Target.com, with our product. And Social Nature has this platform where you can write reviews. It says that it's from Social Nature, so it's clear. So that was great, because if you go on Target.com, you can see like reviews, and it was very helpful just for, I feel like, consumer credibility to know with a new product what you're buying. On the back end, we knew Samira and I did around 100 demos. We're very hands-on, basically until last year, November. It was just the two of us. I headed up sales. She's our CEO, finance, ops. We brought on 1 team member, and then this year in May, we added 2 more team members. An SVP of sales, brought my mentor friend out of retirement, so that was really cool. And then a head of sales ops who had worked with me at my last startup. So we're a team now of 5. That being said, what was really important for Samira and I, because in the first year of business, we did all those demos, was just getting more consumer feedback, because the brand that you launch with, no matter how much you love it, and I'm totally obsessed with what our product looks like. We've got great, we've been highlighted by Dieline and like in so many cool publications like Food and Wine, Bon Appetit. It's still not the right look. No matter what you think, there's going to be a better way to communicate. And so working with Social Nature, it was like twofold, right? It was about ensuring that we were like driving more awareness within the target consumer, and ensuring that there was like that level of credibility with more reviews on a very new product in a very competitive space. But on the back end with Social Nature, you get so much data, and you're getting data from people that are exactly the type of people you want the data from. You don't want to go ask your spouse or your best friend, which my best friend is my business partner in this case, but for feedback on what they think. You want people that have zero connection to your product and your brand, so they're going to be super honest. And as we work on a brand refresh that we'll be announcing this fall, it was really helpful concurrently to just be getting data, understanding what's working visually, flavor-wise with consumers. So such a great resource, and we're excited to like continue to grow our work with you based on that.
I love that. I think one of the things that's really interesting when we co-create kind of those questions together. So part of our process would be, you would have the ability to ask custom questions pre and post trial, and that allows us to kind of like unpack assumptions at first seeing the brand, and then post trial, okay, like how does this compare to your go-to brand, and what product attributes resonate most? What flavors were you interested in trying before? What flavors did you love now? And one of the things that I've always found most interesting is like, even on our end, when we're co-creating those questions, I'm like, oh, I don't actually know the answer. Like, and that's just it, is that everyone thinks they know the answer. And I've been doing this long enough to know you don't. There is certain things around, price positioning and product that you just need the data to validate, which I love, is like, that's kind of, in the forefront of your story, like over and over again, is like challenging our own assumptions when it comes to go to market is just so important. We talk about this in kind of like the boardroom all the time, is like, are we sure we know what we know? And so like just kind of finding any way you can to unpack those assumptions is so important. So I love that. You also talk about in-store demos. Are there other shopper marketing levers that you're pulling? I think one of the things that a lot of the registrants were asking around is like, okay, so I get my product on the shelf, like it's a little overwhelming to know what to do next. Like, what are you doing to drive in-store velocity and sales? What does that look like for
Yeah.
you?
So I will say for Samira, it was important to do our own demos initially, just to hear that feedback, understand what's working. We don't do as many demos now. That was really almost like selfish for us in year one. And we did them across the country to basically understand our audience, like hands-on approach. And I highly recommend all founders do that. Because you definitely don't want to live in an echo chamber. Like you want to hear people say, I don't like this product, or oh my God, it's too expensive. You actually need to live through those moments, smile with grace, and then ask, what do you not like, or what? And of course, you can never create a product that's going to please everyone. We are very thankful that it felt like at our demos, about 8.5 out of 10 people loved our product. But, I'm not interested in people that are like singing, the praise. I'm interested in the people that don't like it. And is there something bigger there that we could address so we get 9.9 out of 10 people trying it, liking it? That being said, our real strategy is very, very focused on investing heavily on merchandising. Again, coming from a service mentality, you really have to think about like the retailers. I mean, these large retailers, they've got hundreds of thousands of items. You're a brand new brand. You're not top of mind. You're such a small part of their sales at that point. It's highly likely that you're sitting in the back stock and you're not being restocked. So once your brand's really working on shelf and you are a bigger velocity mover, you have much greater likelihood of actually getting restocked. Historically, from my experience as a repeat founder, a lot of the times that you might see a drop off in sales, assuming your product already is working, you have those great indicators of success, is that people just forgot to merchandise it. So our primary lever is investing in merchandising, and the type of merchandisers that also have the ability to go in the back room and then restock if product is empty. And if, product is also empty in the back room, letting our team know, our sales team, so that we're then pushing our distributor, or for our direct accounts, we go direct to get reorders in. And then promotions. Those are kind of the big things that we do. Most retailers require a minimum of 4 promotions a year. And yes, you are the one that is required to fund that promotion. So, walking in eyes wide open, again, understanding how costly it is to play in the space and being well capitalized is really important. But that's kind of our thing. We're very retail focused. We only sell on Amazon. We don't do D2C. My background is in retail, and we spend most of our efforts there.
Amazing. Larissa, one of the registrants asked a great question around what are some signals that you see to know that their brand is ready to go from like regional to national, and what are some of the kind of like those buying signals from buyers, so to speak, to know that, okay, this is ready? I mean, you talked about like kind of capital efficiency, but I'm wondering if there's other kind of markers that you look for.
Yeah, I mean, if product is turning quickly, that's one. If we can see that the brand is continuing to get reorders in the stores that they are in, that's definitely a piece of it. But the other piece is just talking to the brand. We can see from the retail side what is in demand in terms of specific categories that they're looking for, and we can see on the brand side ingredients that are trending or specific labeling that is trending. And we can use that information, and we do. But then the other piece is understanding the brand's aspirations, which accounts that they are talking to. We have a store list feature, so you can go in and see who we work with and use that as a launch point to start pitching your product into additional retailers if you want to keep working with us as the first distributor. And then from there, we're collaborating with the brand. So you would have a category manager that you can be in touch with to communicate if you're trying to get into a bigger account. And we don't promise to be a broker, but we can definitely help. And, we curate these boxes of innovation each month based on our data, based on the specific retailers. But part of that data is understanding what your goals are and knowing that you're looking to expand into the Midwest. And so we can get you in front of Fresh Time, for example.
Amazing. Another interesting question that I'm reminded here about is, okay, so can you share some insights on negotiating terms with the larger retailer chains, particularly regarding shelf space and pricing? surely that's probably a question for both of you. But yeah, how do you play ball with some of these larger retailers? I happen to know from the brand side that, you know, there is room for negotiation. So what does that look like, in your guys' opinion?
That
I
is
would
sort of
say
an
there's a lot of
extension
negotiation. Oh, go ahead, Laura.
I would say that is also an extension of the last answer that I gave, that I would add. Making sure that the brand is ready to support the everyday low price that some of these key accounts are going to be looking for to meet their margin targets. A matter of cents can really make a difference, because these are margin percentages that the retailer is looking for to meet their sales goals, to Bella's point. And so we work with the brand on that prior to pitching products. In some cases, we need to check in and see, are they willing to offer promotions 4 times a year? Are they willing to support an everyday low price? What does that look like? And then in addition, there's traction proof points as part of that data story that we would bring in. If you're doing really well on social media, if you're doing really well on your e-commerce store or in the accounts that we specifically support for you, we'll take that and we'll help tell the story with it. But bigger retailers are a bit of a different ball game than the initial independent retailers that you'd be placed in.
Yeah, and I would just add, there's very little room for negotiation as a brand, particularly for going after major retailers. There are just standards and rules, and whether you're a brand that's doing 150,000 a year or 100 million a year, everyone unfortunately is just given the same sort of rules and metrics. Maybe once you've got a nice ACV and you're really, really driving that incremental growth and you're pretty far along, you're in at least 10,000 doors, you can have a tiny bit more like leverage to negotiate, but there's just a lot of standards for how the large companies work that you have to operate within. I will say, if you are minority certified, I highly recommend, if you're not and you qualify as one, getting that certification, because there are a number of larger retailers that will, at the very least, either have no or heavily reduced slotting fees. So that has been really helpful. Samira and I, are WBNC certified. We're also Middle Eastern women owned. So that has been helpful as we do launch in some larger national retailers that, acknowledge and celebrate these minority certs. It's definitely worth the paperwork.
Amazing. Anu has a question around explain EDLP and how is this different from regular 35 to 40% margins? Maybe that's either of you. Larissa? Oh, you're on mute.
So the larger retailers are going to be looking for special pricing, basically. And so different retailers have different margin targets, but the bigger retailers, I mean, you might have experienced this as a shopper. If you go in, oftentimes the product is more affordable than if you go to, this is an extreme example, Erewhon. But it's, they're getting these cost plus deals with the big distributors, and that's often how they're able to support those lower prices on the shelf. But the brand is also offering that. And so with Pod Foods specifically, the way that promotions work is that you offer the promotion directly to the retailer. And so the retailers are going to be looking for better deals, basically the larger they are.
Yeah, that makes sense. One of the things that is commonly asked in our discovery calls here at Social Nature is hitting velocity targets. So maybe we can talk about that for a second, because one of the benefits of Social Nature is to ensure that brands do hit those velocity targets. So, you've got on the shelf, the buyers want to see that you hit these particular targets. So how many sales per store per week? And a lot of our job here at Social Nature is just kind of unpacking that for brands. And unfortunately, it's often the case that they don't know what their velocity target should be. And I love, Larissa, that you're also shedding the light through Pod Foods about what actually is happening at the store level. Because of course, that's so hard to track often for emerging brands who can't afford spins. So question for you, Larissa, because this is commonly asked for us here at Social Nature is, what is a good velocity? Like what is good velocity when you're first starting out? Obviously, that also changes by category. So if you're skincare or supplement, your velocity is going to be way slower than food and bev, but maybe just some general benchmark data would be helpful for the audience.
Yeah, I mean, the range is going to be so wide. Retailers will often, as an example, order from distributors in eaches, which means like individual units in vitamins, as an example, or supplements. And so that means they're not turning through your case pack of 12 in a given order, which can take a month or more. So that's not great. In terms of like a great example, because a lot of people aren't in vitamins, but then, on the other side of this is candy. And so I'm sure, Bella can speak more specifically to what these retailers are looking for on that side of the equation. But we see retailers ordering in, confections and chips and things like this. They'll order case or more every week. And so the case pack's usually 12 units.
Bella, what's good velocity for candy, especially as you went from the 100 doors to the 1,500 doors?
Yeah, believe it or not, it's really, really low. When you look at BFY candy, which is the space we play in, it's right around 2 or slightly under 2 units per SKU per week. So we're out there, excited to get stories and retailers where we're moving, without saying what specific retailers, but like 5 to 17 units per SKU per week. Like we're there to, I love how you started off, Ashley, with the word win, like you're here to help people win. Especially as an early brand, you can't just be a tiny bit better than the average or a tiny bit better than the market competitor, specific in your category. You really, to capture buyers' attention, need to crush it, and ideally without a lot of promos, because you want to show, I always like to launch in a retailer without promos that first 1 or 2 months, so we can see how the brand's resonating and performing, and rely heavily on merchandising, because again, like ensuring it's actually set up on shelf and being of service to the distributor and the retailer is important. The product's getting moved there. And then maybe month 3, do a promo, calculate how much lift you get 1, 2, 3 months later before you do another one. But it is important to show that when you're driving this incremental category growth and you are really winning and dominating and being far, far superior than the average, that it's not just because you're promoting all the time. There are a lot of brands that rely on a promo strategy, and, promos have to be thoughtful and well managed.
Absolutely. And one of my favorite things about our insights capability at Social Nature here is I want to know what products the consumer is buying before trying the Better For You product, and then how does that Better For You product compare to the conventional product? Because I think 9 times out of 10, to your point, there isn't a lot of Better For You candies out there. So it could just be that the person doesn't have a lot of, familiarity with this category, or that this product is so much better than the conventional gummy bear or whatever. So like kind of the debunking, maybe some just general assumptions around that, is one of the pieces of data that I've had a lot of brands take to a conventional shopper to say, hey, this is better than your conventional brand that you've given tons of shelf space to, and this is how much better it is. Give us a shot. So,
and I think the dollar per square is really important. So that's one of the things that more premium products bring, right? Like the average, what you really want to be looking at is like, oh, and if you can show up in Experian data or what have you, it's like, oh, my average customer spends X dollars more per checkout. So I'm bringing in a valuable shopper that, whether it's EDLP kind of retailer or a super premium, everybody wants that shopper that at check size, if they have your product in their cart on average, maybe it's $15 or $20 more than a traditional shopper. And then at the same time, these premium products made with, quality ingredients, nobody's charging more because they're trying to be assholes. They're charging more because it literally costs a lot more to make premium products. You're dealing with quality ingredients, that average, like the ring up, like every week, how much they're spending and how many dollars your product's driving. Maybe your product only sells 3 units and the conventional one sells 12, but the margin you're bringing and the dollar is much higher. So just kind of putting that there for food for thought.
Love it. There's a lot of very specific questions coming through the chat that I want to invite. So what we're going to do now, I think, is we're going to probably wrap it up, but I want the audience to, you'll see a prompt on your screen. And what we're asking is that if you want to opt in to stay in touch with all of us or none of us, but the idea is that opt in to stay in touch with us, then we'll be able to address these questions more specifically through an email chat and even set up a call. But thanks so much for your time, ladies. It was just a really thoughtful conversation. I feel like we could talk about this for hours, but want to be mindful of everyone's time for the day. But yeah, any last words of advice or for folks here?
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, let's do it again
Yeah,
soon.
thank you. And wishing everybody who's calling in, who's the early stage brand, a lot of success.
Yeah.
Yes.
Amazing. Well, let's continue the conversation offline, and everyone enjoy their Wednesdays.
Thank you.
Take care.
Hello.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.